Hello, Buddy Martin here. We're a little bit late tonight, waiting on the result of the basketball game, which is still up in the air. But this is Wednesday night, one of our favorite nights of the week, with our Sweet and Sour program. Ali Peak Wilbur is back. David Moulton will join us later. We have many things to talk about, discuss, and ponder here on this program, so stay tuned. Coming your way right here on this channel, The Buddy Martin Show.
It's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye!
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening, welcome to the program. I'm Buddy Martin. This is a Wednesday night. That means if all hands are on board, and they are, we've got Ali Peak Wilbur and David Moulton for you tonight discussing the state of things, all things Gators and otherwise. And it's great to have Ali back once again. And don't miss any more programs. I want to dock you on your contract, Ali. You can't do that anymore, okay? Are you listening to me, Ali? All right, stand by. Some reason we're not getting Ali. Here we go. Let's try her now. Oh boy. All right, Ali, hang with me a second. Okay, there you are.
Yes, here I am.
I found you. You're trying to hide from me, but I found you anyway. So we're working in a fluid situation, shall we say, here tonight. Florida-Alabama basketball program is, it what excuse me a second, my screen just moved. Something's happening. There's phantoms in here. Things are going on my screen. The Florida-Alabama basketball program is, I'm going to get it right. Honestly, things are happening in front of my eyes. I can't believe. I think my producer has controlled my computer here. I'll get it out. The Florida-Alabama basketball game is still underway, going to overtime, and we'll try to keep you posted. You can keep us posted. We'll have our TVs in front of us. So, so Ali, nice to see you again, and hope you're doing well. And as we await the outcome, we've got to talk some football. It's what we do here on this program, and do it mostly. And it's hard to measure exactly what is going on and exactly how much progress they're having. But the fact is that the blind in the blind, we still don't know what we're dealing with here. And not sure of the progress report. Have you heard anything about recruiting, Ali, that you can share?
Well, I mean, we got a commitment from a 4-star offensive lineman out of South Georgia. Just a couple of that wants to come and block for DJ Lagway. It's actually incredibly interesting to me because he picked Florida over a bevy of schools, but his finalists included FSU and LSU. And I find that very interesting, particularly for Florida State, because you went 13-0 during the regular season. Florida had obviously a subpar year. And so the fact that Mike Norvell can't sell this recruit on why it would be better to come to a program that's 13-0 than I'm sure the negative recruiting line is that Florida is unstable and may have a completely different coaching staff in a year. So it's very interesting that in that head-to-head battle, Norvell did not win. I think that, it speaks to Billy Napier, but also it should be something that maybe Florida State fans should be a little bit concerned about, because coming off the season they should have their very best recruiting, and their best recruiting is still not better than Napier's recruiting. So I find that interesting.
It's funny, the perception is not that at all. I'm not sure why. In reality, if you took everything away and just said, here's the class, it was a good recruiting class, no matter what, although at one time they were higher and lost some of their prospects. And we don't know yet what the fallout will be. That's the thing.
No, we finished with the top 10 class. And so had you not seen that top 3 class ranking in October, I think people would be like, dang, he's out-recruited his record. Which is an incredibly difficult thing to do, right? Out-recruiting your record does not happen often. And he did. And not only did he out-recruit his record, he out-recruited one of our biggest rivals in Florida State, who was 13-0. So, I mean, I get it. Seeing the 3 and then seeing it drop to 10 is kind of hard to swallow. But given the way the season ended, I mean, it's still pretty impressive.
Yeah. We had a pretty good uptick in our outlook in the last 8 or 9 days around here. And I think it stemmed from the fact that some of us thought about, you know what? What's so bad about things? Florida is in a season where they're going to be playing great teams, the great games for fans to go and watch. There will be 12 teams in the national playoffs this year. Some new players arriving. And as Shane Matthews said, the most difficult schedule in the world could be a great opportunity. Think about it. It's what you want to do, play better competition, right? And if you do pull off some wins, look where you're going to be now. So there are many things you can be grateful for in this. And at a time like now, and I wrote a column about this, I want you to share with me on this, and also David. I looked at the schedule and realized, holy mackerel, they're playing. I knew they did, but it didn't hit me. They're playing Texas on November the 9th in Austin. Yes. It's happening. They're playing another blue blood school, great program with a terrific history. And it's going to be, I don't know if it'll be a rivalry or not, but it's pretty brutal to add Texas to that already possible schedule. But, I mean, you can look at it a lot of different ways. And if you look at it from the standpoint of opportunity, there's plenty of that.
Well, there is. And I think you got to look at why we think this schedule is so hard. If we are at the top of our game, if it's 2006 or 2008 or 96 or something like that, I think we look at this schedule and we're like, this is awesome. There's lots of chance for us to shine, as opposed to right now we're saying there's lots of place for us to stumble. But I mean, if you break it down, I've got it pulled up right now. So Miami is going to be bringing in a brand new quarterback. Mm-hmm. They have a coach in the identical situation that Napier is, going into year 3 and on the hot seat. Yeah. That is an incredibly winnable game. You then play Samford. After that, you play Texas A&M, who brand new head coach will be breaking in a brand new quarterback and a ton of transfer players because they lost, 25 guys in the portal. So a bunch of guys that are going to be playing their, the third game of the season and it's going to be the third game they've ever played together. That's winnable. Mississippi State, if you can't beat Mississippi State, what are we doing? Then you play UCF, Tennessee. We beat Tennessee last year. So all these people that talk about Tennessee's trending in the right direction and Florida's not, we beat them, right? And so I think, why would the same quarterback that beat them last year not be able to beat them this year? Kentucky has been an Achilles heel for Florida the last couple of years. That's going to be a hard one. Obviously, Georgia's going to be a hard one. Texas is going to be a hard one. LSU is going to be breaking in a new quarterback. I do think that they are trending more in the right direction than Florida is, but there's a ton of unknowns. They lost a ton of talent. Ole Miss, going to be breaking in a new quarterback. Florida State, going to have a new quarterback and essentially an entirely new team because they either graduated, went to the NFL, or hit the transfer portal for the most part. So, I understand on paper why we say this is the toughest schedule in college football next year. But when you break down what's actually going on with these teams, I think there's a ton of winnable games there. It's just whether or not we'll capitalize on it.
And that's it, really right there in the essence. And let's be also mindful of the fact that this is a lot of new stuff for other teams. This is not like Florida's the only team that has to deal with the unknown. because
Sure.
they aren't, and the other schools are going to lose players too.
They
So it's
do,
going to
and a lot,
happen.
so many teams that we play, I want to say it's like 7 that we play, are breaking in new quarterbacks. We return Graham Mertz, who is a leader for us, who we know is capable. He's been more than a game manager for Florida, but so in we're one of the more consistent offensive teams that's coming back next year, which is an interesting concept for us.
For sure. All right, Allie Peek Wilbur, Peek Inside the Gators. You can see her podcasts, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week at least, and she's on other people's shows. And if you want to check her out, go to YouTube and look for her show. She's always got something to say, and she's informative about it. And enjoy her program. Allie, what have you had on this week, and what have people been saying about it?
I talked about our we got a commitment earlier this week, so we talked about that a little bit. We're talking about players that we've got returning. We've talked about this opening now that Florida has because Darnell Stapleton went back to the NFL. He joined Dan Quinn's staff at the Washington Commanders. So we've got this on the field coaching opening. So what is Napier going to do with this? And we talked about, what are the options here for that, essentially? And I mean, he could bring in an offensive coordinator, but he said in his press conference just a week ago that he thought about a lot of different options, but he's going to be the guy that calls plays. So that seems unlikely. He could go to the other side of the ball, right, and bring in somebody else to help on defense, because we know that's the group that needs the most turnaround from last year to this year. My suggestion is, honestly, to make that new special teams coach that he hired an on the field position. I think that would be what makes the most sense, but it's interesting for us to see what he does with that, but that is going to be a role that's going to need to be filled one way or the other.
All right, we're going to take a little break here and hear from our sponsors, folks at Moulton Law. David Moulton is in the orange or blue room standing by. We've got the sweet. Now we're going to get the sour. He's back too. He missed them both last week on this program. Let's do this. Let's hear from our friends at Moulton and come back and have Moulton and Allie right here on the Buddy Martin Show. Jeffrey, you do a show where you get asked a lot of questions. I've got one for you right now, okay, regarding how do you know whether your case is being handled right and what to do about it. In medicine, you can get a second opinion if you're not satisfied with the doctor's opinion that they have. And do you have that in law? Can you do that with lawyers?
Yeah, buddy. As a matter of fact, we get quite a few calls from folks that have signed up, particularly with the big box law firms, that they do a hell of a good job of putting ads on TV. But after that, they don't really measure up to the way we try to create a client experience that's outstanding. And we're always willing to review a case and give a second opinion, just like with a doctor, because not all law firms are created equal.
I guess that's the normal thing. Just go to Moulton Law, Google it, and find out, and just give them a call. And like you say, if you come in, you get to see a Moulton. You don't get shuffled off to somebody else. You get to see a Moulton, and that's good to know, because a lot of people don't know how to do that stuff, like me. And maybe you can coach us. So Moulton Law. They won't back down. They will take your questions about your case if you have a question.
Yes, whether it's a new case or an existing case, give us a call. We'd be glad to go over it with you. There's no charge to review your case with you. And a lot of times it makes good sense just to get a second opinion.
Good stuff from Moulton Law. They don't back down, but they will give you a second opinion. All right. To the orange and blue room. Let's see what he's doing these days. He's always traveling now that things have slowed down a bit. Perhaps he's got a day off or so. We'll find out from our buddy David Moulton, who is right. Let's see if I can get this thing right this time. Okay. Here we go. David Moulton, who joins the program now. David, good evening to you.
How are you two doing? Hi, Allie.
I'm good. How are you? What's going on?
Well, I'm trying to follow this Alabama-Florida basketball game, to be honest with you. Bama scored the first 7 points of overtime, but the Gators have just cut it to 1 with 36 seconds to go. This would be
Yeah.
huge. Gators would be a game back in the loss column. They get Bama and back in the O Dome before the year's out, I believe. I mean, I know Tennessee could be ahead of them, and Tennessee beat Florida head to head, but for a team that 3 weeks ago was out and 2 weeks ago was on the bubble, now they're in 8, 9, or 10 seed in most bracketologies, and if they were to beat Bama at Bama, who's I think hasn't lost an SEC game at home in 2 years, this changes everything.
And I did hear, I believe, somebody said, I can't remember who said it, this would be Florida's first time ever back-to-back road wins over a team ranked in the top 15, whatever that means. So I guess that's significant.
Well, listen, Connecticut, who's won 2 national titles in the last 10 years, they showed last night losing at Creighton. They have not beaten a ranked team on the road in 10 years. So for the Gators to have beaten 2 top 15 teams on the road in 2 weeks, I think it'd be pretty impressive.
Yeah. I was going to say it later, but I mean, I think the basketball success is taking a little heat off certain places, that we pretty well guess, right?
Good. I mean, Allie and I can't keep saying the same thing for 8 months, can we? I mean, honestly, I hope the basketball team has an impressive next 4 weeks. I hope the baseball team goes to Omaha. I mean, honestly, the softball team goes to Oklahoma City. I mean, seriously, if I'm Billy Napier,
goes to the national championship.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if I'm Billy Napier, I'm like, listen, I want so much good things happening that people don't pick their head up until July 4th weekend's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, anyway, it's interesting, and it's a little tiresome hearing whining and complaining all the time. And I know Gator fans are disappointed, and I don't blame them. They should be. But the fact is that we don't really know a whole lot. I mean, Alex stays on top of it pretty well. Honestly, I don't know anything, David. I'm not sure about you, but getting real information about things like, what's going on in recruiting, what's going on with the NIL deal, whatever, it's hard to come by. I'm a little concerned that maybe some of these players that have been in the bag, not meaning in that no wrong way, that Florida's had nailed down for their class, they might not be delivered. Things could go wrong, Allie, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots that can go wrong. But I feel like we're in such a wait and see mode at this moment, right? There is, we're not going to know a whole lot until, we'll know some at spring ball, but honestly, until we put the pads on against Miami, I don't know that we're going to have the answers that fans want. It appears we're moving in the right direction with strength and conditioning. It stinks that we make a hire, then a month later he's gone. But they've promoted Tyler Miles, who, from everything I've heard, the players advocated for him. Which, if you remember, when Savage was our coach and Mullen got fired, the players advocated for Savage to stay. Napier chose to not do that, which I totally understand why. You want to clean house top to bottom, and I get that. But now Ole Miss has Savage and has been there, and so I think in this situation, when you make that hire and then, he gets swooped up by Boston College, it's not an opportune time to make a strength and conditioning hire. You're already a month into your off-season workouts. If there's a guy that the players trust and like, who's following, the same plan that the guy that just left had created, why not continue the continuity? Keep the players happy, keep them bought into what you're doing. So, I think that was a good move.
I don't want to sound like a negative Nelly here, but and we've talked about it a lot, is that it's not so critical that he didn't get his man he wanted for, that he went to Boston College with his friend. Right. But I understand how you have coaching relationships and what have you. But like Ben Troop said, every coach has got relationships. It's not just them. I think that the perception, David, is that when you hire a guy and he's there 5 weeks and he goes, and you have difficulties with some of the choices that you've made in the past and you've lost members of your coaching staff, that maybe your hiring choices are not the best.
Yeah.
Well, there's no doubt he's missed on a couple. Allie was pounding the table for 6 months last year, and she was right every day for 6 months about offensive line play, about special teams, and about strength and conditioning. And so, I trust Allie in terms of who it is they brought in and whether or not they're well received and we think they're going to work out. I'm more interested in the dudes. I'm more interested in replenishing the talent. And there is another opportunity here coming up, after spring ball, that whole new transfer period opens up. And once again, Florida actually has some advantages. They have roster spots available, they have playing time available. Okay, they have more needs than they would like to have, but that can be good in the transfer portal. Somebody knows I can leave here, go there, and play.
Yeah.
All right. And it is Florida after all. It is the SEC after all. It's arguably the best schedule anyone's ever played ever. I mean, being seen's not going to be a problem next year if you play for the Gators. So my hope is, because Billy does move slower than most, my hope is he makes a couple of moves in the spring, though. I hope we keep replenishing the pipeline here because they don't have enough talent. So any opportunity to bring in more talent, I hope Napier and his staff are doing it because they need it.
Well, they don't have two offensive line coaches anymore, Allie.
They don't. Darnell Stapleton left for the NFL. So, I mean, they're going to have to do something, like we said a few minutes ago, with that on the field position. David, I don't know what your thoughts are. My thoughts are the easiest solution at this moment is to promote the special teams guy that you brought in and make him an on the field position. And essentially when we say on the field position, tons of guys stand on the field that are not an on the field coach, but they don't have a headset. So that's going to be what the difference is there. And there's massive benefits to your special teams coach wearing a headset.
Yeah, whatever they did last year, I want them to do the opposite this year. Okay, certainly when it concerns offensive line play and special teams. So yes, Allie, I completely endorse what you say. I am curious. I don't think it's crucial in January or February, but do we know for sure, is Billy calling the plays? Okay,
he said in a press conference like a week or so ago that he thought about the different options, but that, he was going to be the person calling the plays. He did allude to our tight ends coach potentially having more responsibilities. He didn't say that those more responsibilities could potentially be play calling, but, he didn't rule it out either. I don't know if having this opening on the field changes anything for him. But I will say, as much as I want Florida to have an offensive coordinator that's not Billy Napier, I can understand if you feel like your back is up against the wall, betting on yourself, which is essentially what Napier is doing. He is saying, I got to where I am by being an offensive mind. I can call plays. If I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down on my own doing. I understand not necessarily wanting to bring somebody else in and change the system when you feel like you potentially only have 1 year left to prove yourself. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I get it.
I think it's a bad look for Billy, and it's a little unfair that it's a bad look for Billy, but it's a bad look for Billy when Ryan Day, with all that he's accomplished, calling the plays, gives up play calling to Chip Kelly.
Correct.
Okay, when you can count how many losses Ryan Day has basically on one hand.
Yeah,
and so
place.
Exactly. So, this is where, once again, I think if you're a Gator fan, you're like, oh man, I guess, but the reason why I would, if I was on the staff, I would be saying to Billy, you know what? You might be right. Here's the problem. We have so many leaks in the dam right now, and you're the head coach, and you're going to be held accountable for all the leaks. Don't you think it's a better look for you if you can make sure you stop the leak on special teams, make sure that we're emphasizing what we need to emphasize with line play? Not only that, maybe you get to work a little hands-on with the quarterback of the future instead of you always worried about game planning and working with the starter. Maybe you do a little, the way Urban used to, hey, I got guys calling the plays and doing this, but when I need to focus on a couple players or I want to focus on special teams, Nick Saban would always, let me focus on the DB this week. I just wonder, you can't do that if you're calling signals. And that's what I would be arguing with Billy about, going, listen, I know you think you're the best play caller you can find, but we need a head coach right now more than we need a play caller out of you.
And that's it. Do you want to be a head coach or do you want to be an offensive coordinator? Because you may not be able to do both. And that, I think that's kind of where we are. But, at this juncture, it appears that ship has sailed.
Okay.
So,
and at this point, hey, beat Miami then, obviously. I mean, beat Miami, get off to a solid start, and, it's going to be a hard year, though. It's a brutal schedule, and you hope they stay healthy and they play well and they win the close games that they let slip last year. I mean, so that he can see 2025. By the way, Gators lost in overtime by 5, 98-93.
Yeah. They led that game the whole way and pretty much.
Yeah, they had a 9-point lead with 6 minutes to go. They gave up a couple of key offensive rebounds down the stretch, regulation, 2 big offensive rebounds in overtime that Alabama scored points off of. That came back to bite them.
Yeah, it was a tough loss. I want to talk to you about broadcasting, guys, for a second. And then I want to talk about, they're talking about expanding the playoffs already. We hadn't even played them yet, right?
Come on now. I think all three of us, didn't we have a little kind of bet amongst ourselves? I think Allie and I did, as to how quickly it was going to get to 16, though. We didn't think they'd be at 12 very long. I don't think we did.
No, I think I agree. I think it'll be higher than that before it's over. But anyway, so which topic do you want first? They met in Grapevine today. It looks like there were some favorable responses. There's people talking 14 and 16 teams. The contract goes up in 26. I just want 24 to get there already. Let's get that going, right? So that's those conversations, while anticipated, it seems a little premature to jump to that just yet, doesn't it?
I mean, yes. Premature, yes. To already talk about how we're going to expand it before we've actually.
We haven't tried the 12 yet, right?
Season with the expansion. I will say, when I looked at the rules, and I don't have them pulled up off the top of my head right now, but they made some adjustments that they just announced that are different than what they had previously announced. But it seems like
it's the highest rated.
Yeah, conference
top 5.
Correct, but it seems
it's not automatic. It's not automatic if Toledo's, somehow number 2 in the MAC and the MAC is up there. I mean, that won't happen. But so it is possible that eliminates 2 teams from getting in, doesn't it? At the top 5, maybe the back 7. I'm not sure. Do you know, David? The 5 and 7 rule.
Well, it's pretty simple. Whoever the 5 highest rated conference champions are, they're going to get in.
No, not even conference champions, but that would have to be. It's actually the way it reads, highest rated teams. But
no, buddy. It's 5.
Yeah.
Go ahead, 5 and 7. 5 and 7. The 5 are the 5 highest rated conference champions. They automatically qualify, and the top 4 of those 5 get seeded 1 through 4.
Correct.
Then the 5th, which could be a highly thought of team, or it could be a Sun Belt, Conference USA team that will make the playoff, but they'll make it and they'll be seeded 12th, but they're in.
So that's my issue, right? Is that you could have, let's say that you're you're that 5th team, excuse me, I'm saying this wrong. If you're the 4th one ranked, but you could be, let's say, 14th overall or something like that, you get a bye, and then you could have let's say this year, the second best SEC team who maybe would dominate everybody else. They don't, which is
right. Think about it if we had it this year, and now granted we'd have to take the Pac-12 out and move teams around, but Georgia loses to Alabama. So in theory, Alabama gets a bye, and they're one of the top 4 seeds, where Georgia would, in all likelihood, be the 5 seed. And so Bama gets the bye. Georgia has to play, whoever it was, Liberty or SMU, whoever it was they would have ended up playing. They would have destroyed them at home. And then they would have played Bama, in theory, at a bowl site somewhere. All right.
Right.
Now, we can argue, by the way, Allie, you're AD or you're president. Do you rather be the 4 or the 5?
Yeah.
Because
I
the
mean,
4 gets the bye, but the 5 gets
but
the
the 5 plays the
payday
easiest team in
and
the.
and
Yeah.
plays most years the easiest team in the playoffs. So where you're going to be a big favorite and you get the payday, and instead of having a month off between games, you only
Yeah.
have 2 weeks in between games. I could argue I'd rather be the 5 than the 4.
Yeah, yeah, you could, but I just think there's also the argument, like if you look at, I mean, who would have been the 4th ranked conference champion this year? Would it have been FSU?
Well, that's just it. We would have had, I think, the glorious debate of would it have been Florida State or would it have been Alabama?
I mean, I don't, but in theory, it could be like the Sun Belt champion who's getting a bye, except everybody else in the playoffs below them would probably beat them. I don't know. I think
But Allie, isn't that the same? And now I know college fans will hate this comparison because they like being different than the NFL. But we do see it a lot in the NFL where the 4 seed is the worst division champion. Like this year, it was the last 2 years, it's been Tampa Bay. 2 years ago, they got destroyed by Dallas. This year, they beat an Eagles team that they won 2 more games than in the regular season. So, in theory, college could have the same matchup that we see most years in the NFL, where the best wild card team, the 5, actually has a better record than the worst division champion, the 4.
Right. Right. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And they decreased that conference champion from 6 to 5, basically because there's conferences folding with realignment and the dissolution of the Pac-12 and whatever else. That was another change to this format. But, it's going to be interesting to see. I think that more often than not, we are going to end up with the exact same champion than we would had we just stuck with 4 games. I truly, honestly believe that. However, we are going to have even less wiggle room for debate, and we're going to get to see more football. So, I mean, that's positive, right? But I don't think that at the end of the day, this changes the outcome very often.
It looks like, buddy, they're going to do 12 teams next year and the year after. And now they're already talking about, because the contract ends after the 2025 season. The new contract, whether it's going to be just with ESPN or it's going to be with others, is going to start with the 2026 season. So that's some of what they're talking about in Dallas right now. Apparently, there'll be 12 teams the next 2 years, and then they're already talking about let's make it 14 beginning in 2026. This all has to do with, there was a proposal reportedly earlier today where the SEC and the Big Ten joined forces and looked at the rest of the college football world and said, we're going to get 8 of the 12 spots, and you 7 conferences figure out who gets the other 4. We really don't care. Okay, so that gives you an idea. Right, that gives you an idea of where the SEC and the Big Ten are coming from. They each want 4 teams in the playoff. Well, the other guys are like, well, then there's not going to be any room for us. And most people feel like that's why 12's becoming 14, so that this way the Big Ten and the SEC can have their cake, and the others will make sure that there's enough room left for them as well.
When I'm like listening to all the changes and reading all the articles and stuff, do you know what stood out to me the very most out of all of it, though? All the new stuff that came out. $1.3 billion annually is the deal with ESPN and the college football playoff, right? 6 years, $1.3 billion annually. Yet we're still here asking our fans that make $60,000 a year to pay our athletes so that we can maybe field a team good enough to get there.
Yeah, interesting. All right, so before we get to our discussions about broadcasters, and some of them that we've known famous we're stepping down, and whether it matters how much who is calling the game, we'll talk about that. But first I want to tell you about Titan MRI. They are a company that's gaining a lot of momentum because they make it easy for you, the working person, to get an examination You don't have to have an appointment. You can call them up, same day service. No, no insurance, no problem. You cash your card, and they make it a point to say, "Look, if you can't get here in the daytime, we'll schedule an appointment at night if you'd like, and make it easy for you." So, by appointment, they will do that for you. They have very modern equipment. I'm not sure how many times you guys had MRIs, but if you're a big guy like me in Moulton, especially me, getting inside those tubes is not exactly the coziest thing in the world. You're a little claustrophobic. Well, they understand that at Titan. They have modern equipment. One of the largest bores are opening of any newer high strength MRI unit. So they take your comfort into consideration there and people who have claustrophobia. So try them out. Patients previously having experience on the MRI scan have commented they enjoyed the music. They really don't need the earphones because they're so quiet. TitanMRI.com. Visit them today. Right there, you can go cash your card. Either way, make an appointment. They'll help you set it around your work schedule. It's Sweet and Sour Time. David Moulton and Allie P. Wilbur. We always love having them on tonight. What about the news? Not surprised, a friend of yours and mine, that this is Vern Lundquist's last Masters. David?
Well, Vern had told me that over a year ago, so I'm not surprised at all. They just made it public. I mean, he is 83, and he wanted to do 40. And a couple of years ago, they all sat down and they said, "So what are you thinking?" And Vern says, "Well, by my math, I've done 38. Would it be okay if I did 40?" And Sean McManus of CBS and the Augusta folks said, "Yeah, we'd be fine with that." So, Vern gets to, I think he still wanted to do another year or so of college football. Okay, when 2016 was his last year, but this was Vern's call. And so, he's in better health than he's been in some past years. He's lost weight, and him and Nancy are doing great. So, I'm happy for him.
I'm happy for him, too. And those dulcet tones are so great, and those pipes you never forget. And you always that number 16 call. Yes, sir. The famous calls he's had with Tigers there. It's kind of been his event. I know everybody has to step aside at some point in time. But personally, I will miss Vern Lundquist. I know he got bashed a little toward the end of his career calling college football games because he could remember every game, every name on the roster, whatever. But a good guy, a good broadcaster, and I wish him the best. He's one of the good ones. Allie, you know what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And, I'm definitely in the camp that wish we got to listen to more college football games called by Vern Lundquist. So, if he had his detractors, I don't know, but I was certainly not one of them. And, I think we're in an era where a lot of our broadcasters are probably reaching the age where they, consider retirement. I mean, there's so like Lee Corso has to be hanging it up, any year here there. And even there's so many that are going to be close to the end of their career. And so there's going to be a whole new crop of young guys. And you think about I don't know, I love Jesse Palmer. I think that he is great. I love Aaron Murray. There's just so much young talent that's coming up too. Greg McElwain is another one that I think does a great job. But it does make me wonder who are going to be the people of my generation that, 30 years from now, we're saying oh man, one of the good ones. This is their 40th year calling XYZ.
Yeah, for sure. Burns had some great moments. He had that great call in the basketball game. Duke, the last minute pass. Remember that?
Oh, I was Kentucky.
I was at that game.
The shot.
I was at that game, and he had that call.
No, it's funny. Vern, who was never a number one. Okay, I mean, and he left CBS to go to TNT in the 90s to call Sunday Night Football because it was the first network that made him their number one guy instead of the number two or number three guy. But yet, as a so-called number two guy, I don't know if there's been a broadcaster of the last 50 years who has had more big moments happen in front of him.
Unbelievable.
Than Vern. I mean, whether it be Super Bowls on the radio with the Cowboys, Leitner hitting the shot against Kentucky. He did the Nancy Tanya figure skating Olympic fiasco 30 years ago. All of the SEC. I mean, when the SEC went from a regional, conference to a national conference. That was with Vern on the call
Mm-hmm.
at 3:30 on Saturdays, and I'll miss him.
I will
I
too.
love
We
the
all
guy.
will.
I love the guy. I'd take a bullet for him. I love him.
Yeah. All the best to Vernon and Nancy. All right, so here's one that's kind of shocking. Eli Gold. Now, we all kind of may have suspected that health is not good, and that maybe be stepping aside. But no, they pushed him out the door to Alabama. I can't believe a guy with a reputation of his, who was adored by so many fans, especially in Alabama, would be pushed out the door. I don't know, David. I know nothing about it. Do you? What happened and why?
Well, I got to be brutally honest. Eli didn't do any road games last year except for the Iron Bowl. And I was told before the Iron Bowl this could be his last game. Now, I thought that it was going to be Eli's decision. Okay, because Eli's health had been bad for 2 years. And he clearly...
Cancer.
What?
He was fighting cancer, wasn't he? In the 2022
Yes. Yes, and missed the whole year, and then he was able to, and he had to learn how to walk and talk again. I mean, he was in really bad health for a year and a half, but his goal was to come back and call Bama games in 2023, and he called the home games. But when Eli didn't make the trip to Atlanta for the SEC title game, that's when I thought to myself, I'm curious if he'll be on the call in 2024. This is pure conjecture. I think if Nick was still the coach, Eli would still be doing home games.
Good point.
Nick has an appreciation for history. Nick liked Eli. Eli hosted his coach's show for all those years. I think Nick would have kept Eli around for the home games. Chris Stewart, who's waiting in the wings, would have done the road games. He does basketball. And whenever Eli's time is done, we all know Chris Stewart was going to be the voice of the Tide. But, Allie, can you imagine there being a scenario where the Gators would have pushed Mick Hubert out before Mick wanted to go?
No, definitely not.
No. So that's why it's disappointing.
So whose call ultimately do you think that was?
I think it was the AD's call. I do. They decided to move on. I think with Nick no longer being there, it's kind of like, okay, new era. Let's just sweep it clean. Let's just do it. Make the clean break now.
Yeah.
Well, of course, he's well known for his NASCAR broadcasting as well. So
sure.
As we count it down and we get...
if I could just throw this in there, which is funny because he's going to be remembered as, this great Southern voice, NASCAR and Alabama football.
Right.
He's a New Yorker. I mean, that's the funny thing. He grew up in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, for his career to take him where it took him and for him to be this, legendary voice of the South, okay, yet I think he grew up in Brooklyn. So I don't know. I found that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, the South has had its own brand of broadcasters over the years. Some great ones in the SEC. Used to be fun coming home from a game at night, twisting the dial around and finding some of the great voices, in LSU and Tennessee and all the great calls they had. Speaking of voices, also there was and David, you might remember this. Allie, still too young. There were always some really clever comedians who attach themselves to the SEC or Southern culture. I mean, I'm not talking Louis Grizzard, he was a writer, but always been some people who were Jerry Clower. Remember that name? Jerry Clower at all? Very funny comedian, mostly Deep South. Anyway, there were a lot of them around. There's a woman out right now who I think is one of the funniest people I've ever heard. I'm going to recommend you try her. She's a Tennessee Vol. And I just saw her. She started doing the stand-up at age 52. Her name is Leanne Morgan. She's on Netflix. Guarantee you a half a dozen belly laughs if you listen to her. She works clean. She talks about her family. She has some hilarious perspective on things. And I could watch her all day long. My wife and I both have really enjoyed it. Leanne Morgan will be, in my mind, a superstar among the SEC people. And she already drawing big crowds. So if you haven't had a chance to try her, not Eli, go and try out Leanne Morgan. She's really, really funny. Who's your favorite comedian, Dave?
Unfortunately, I mean, we're talking today or in the
No,
past.
Jerry Seinfeld. Could be anybody. Who's your all-time favorite?
My all-time favorite's George Carlin, but I'm a pretty sarcastic guy, so
Yeah.
I
Carlin
will
was a
say,
brainy guy. He's a smart guy.
I will say it's very dangerous to take a date to a comedian. Okay, because all right, one time I saw George Carlin. I was on a blind date, and he told a very inflammatory joke very early in his show, and I thought it was funny, and she didn't.
Uh-oh.
And we had a great night up until that point. We had a lovely dinner. We were getting along great. Okay, but he brought up a certain subject which is controversial. I thought it was hysterical. She glared holes through me, and basically, I could have taken her home at that moment. So she had to sit there through another hour and 15 minutes of George Carlin. So I don't advise you taking a date, okay, especially early in the relationship to a comedian.
Mm-hmm. Allie, favorite comedian?
I mean, Jim Gaffigan did Gator Growl when I was
growing,
and it was one of the funniest things that I had seen live. He's a little out there, but it was hilarious.
I saw him in Jacksonville like 8 months ago. I'm with you. He's hysterical.
I want to say it was my senior year Gator Growl that he did, and he just was so good. I don't know that watching stand-up comedians is really my thing in general, but I do think he's hilarious.
Well, you think about great comedians, you go back to the days of, Carol Burnett. You're too young, but she was absolutely he was a clown, an absolute clown. If you can watch one of those reruns of Harvey Korman and her and doing some of those skits, I mean, they are still David side splitters today.
Well, buddy, Carol Burnett, I think, has authored two of the funniest jokes ever. Allie can certainly relate to the first one. Carol Burnett was asked one time to describe labor pains, and she said, "Take your bottom lip and pull it over your head." Okay. And then one time she had a joke in her routine which said, "If you talk to God, you're religious. If God talks back to you, you're schizophrenic." All right, so
yeah,
I don't know. Bob Newhart, Carol Burnett. I'm a fan of the old guard.
Yeah. Allie, anybody for you?
I mean, I used to watch Daniel Tosh on Comedy Central all the time too. He's a CF grad. I mean, he is. My husband finds him funnier than I do. There are times when I just have to pick my jaw up off the floor, but he's pretty funny as well.
He's a UF grad?
No, UCF. He's a UCF.
Okay. I didn't know that. All right.
He is? Yes.
Well, I mean, it's very rare you can turn on the TV and get really good belly laughs.
Yeah.
It's just really hard. And when I find somebody gives me 2 or 3 belly laughs, I'm a fan. And Leanne Morgan is funny.
Lately, a newer comedian kind of in the Gaffigan era, Sebastian Maniscalco, I like. I've seen him in person a couple times. Makes fun of his family, okay? He's Italian and makes fun of his big Italian family. It's good material.
Well, I don't know the guy's name, but the guy that does the SEC shorts is hilarious. And if you have not seen those videos, they're always so accurate and so funny.
Yep. And he takes on everyone and everything. There's nobody that they won't go after. So every fan base has to laugh. Right.
Yeah. So funny.
The guy who always killed it, but he can never work today, is Don Rickles. His sarcastic humor, and he's just so funny. But he would get run out of town today, any of the jokes he made today, because all ethnic, including his own. But that's not allowed today, of course. Well, here you go. Go ahead, Dave.
No. I'm actually telling a couple Rickles jokes to myself and going, nope, can't tell that. No, can't tell that. No.
That's right. Speaking of Carol Burnett, just a little moment skit that she does. I love that skit where she does like Gone with the Wind, remember? And she falls down the stairs and she grabs all the drape and, and rapes it around, drowning her, she's walking down and someone comes along and says, Beautiful dress. He says, just something I picked up and saw in the window. It just cracked me up when I saw that. Anyway, good to be able to laugh a little. You guys always make my week brighter, both of you. Appreciate it very much, the information you bring, the personality you bring, and the joy you bring. I sound like I'm doing somebody. Who is it? Good to have you, Allie and David, once again. Welcome back. It's just not a normal week without you on Sweet and Sour. So thank you so much, both of you.
Thanks for having me, Ben. As always, very fun.
Allie, all the best to you and the family.
Thanks, you too, David.
All right, they'll wrap up this. Thank you, David. Wrap up tonight's program. Thank you for our sponsors, for you, for listening and supporting this program. As you know, we're on here 4 days a week, sometimes 5. I would encourage you, please, on this channel to hit subscribe. My producer said, be sure and tell them to hit subscribe. It's important that you do that for us. We're now seeing around several other programs. Don't forget to listen to Rob Brown and Brendan Martin in their show, which I think it's being called, I'm not sure what it's going to be called now, but it's SEC Sidelines. That's right. Underway, some plans there are things that are going to be exciting, and glad to have Rob on our team as well. Thanks to our sponsors, Titan MRI, Meldon Law, and of course this one, Renstar, the folks who've been supporting us so long, and we appreciate it so much. You know, Renstar does a terrific job on clinical trials. Clinical trials exist to bring the new therapies to the public safely, and clinical trials would not exist without the commitment of you, the volunteer. So if you would like to volunteer at some of Renstar's clinical trials, log on to renstar.net. They'll tell you how to do that. You might receive study-related medications and procedures at no cost to you or your insurance. You may gain access to new investigational medications or devices that are not otherwise available and receive compensation for your time and travel. As a research site, Renstar Medical Research is dedicated to bringing new opportunities to participate in medical science to our local community. And an important part of that commitment is helping to answer your questions about volunteering for a clinical trial. So check them out at renstar.net. Renstar Medical Research, seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. Our thanks to our guest tonight, Allie Pete Wilbur, who you can hear on her podcast every 4 or 5 times a week. As far as Like the Gators, she has great stuff on that. Of course, David Moulton, whose program now has been heard in several markets, including Gainesville, Miller and Moulton. So, veteran journalist he is. I learn something from him every time I do a show. So, folks, have a good night. Back at you tomorrow night for Orange and Blue Buds. Have a good one.